Good. So we have, well, we have two more topics to cover. One is, in fact, both topics were suggested by yourself. And one is, why did direct perpetrators engage in the sort of torture, execution, and other rights violations and abuses they admitted to having committed against their fellow officers and civilians? Interesting question. And the other one is the factors that caused Yahya Jammeh to fall. I was thinking that we would do the first one.
Okay.
And then we skip the last one.
Okay.
It would be in the report. Those who are interested can read it. But then we would look at your concluding remarks in the report, which you provided. But after that, we would give you an opportunity to summarize the report in a language you're most comfortable in, one of the local languages you're most comfortable in. I leave it to you to choose which or how you would organize that.
Okay.
And thereafter, we would give you an opportunity to make your final remarks. Is that a good way to proceed?
Yes, indeed, as we discussed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Now, kindly take us through your observations regarding the question, why did the perpetrators engage in this sort of torture, execution, and other rights violations and abuses they admitted to having committed against their fellow officers and civilians?
Thank you, Lead Counsel. Following the very interesting questions, and sometimes very difficult questions that you posed, I thought it necessary to maybe spend some time, given the TRRC proceedings and the hearings, to provide some kind of a framework that would help us understand why an Alhaji Martin, Sabally, or Kanyi would do the things that they did. And one way of approaching this question was to introduce another concept, which I call militarization or militarization.
All this is not necessarily to absolve them of responsibility,
yes, no,
but just to provide a theoretical framework,
yes,
or a lens,
yes,
through which we can look at, yes, them and understand why they did what they did.
Absolutely, Counsel. In fact, in my remarks later on, I suggest that they take personal responsibility for the atrocities that they committed. It is in no ways a means to rationalize or justify what they had committed. Thank you for reminding me of that, Counsel. So what I'm trying to do in this subsection is to look at the underlying motivations for their atrocious actions against their peers and higher-ups. So I introduced the concept of militarization. It goes without saying that since 1994 to 2016, Gambia had at one time or the other been ruled by a military dictatorship. Even following the transition in 1996, Gambia still maintained or retained some of the most odious elements, including the decrees that kept Yahya Jammeh in position. So our society was deeply militarized. The language also changed. Political opponents became enemies. And this kind of thinking, militarization in other words, was also emblematic in the actions of the junglers, the black, and so forth and so on. What does it mean, basically?
But also emblematic in Jammeh himself. The first thing he did was ban political opposition.
Yes, that was emblematic of that too. But now since we're talking about Elijah Martin and Kanye and the others, I decided to reintroduce the notion of militarization. Militarization, to define it simply, is a shift in personnel, institutional, and societal values. When you have a psychological shift in your mind, which leads you to believe that you can solve problems not through peaceful means, but military means, then you have gone through a major psychological shift. It is a value system that basically prioritizes the use of legal and lethal force. What I'm also suggesting is that militarization permeates the entire security sector apparatus. But more damaging, it also infiltrated civil society. And it is fascinating that even under the most egregious violations of human rights, under Jammeh, some people still yearn for his return to the country. To me, that is symptomatic of an internalized militarization complex that makes you believe that continued repression and violation of your rights, including killings, is preferable to what we have today.
Reminiscent of Stockholm Syndrome?
Yes. In so many ways at a more general level. I also suggest in the paper, in addition to the values and attitudes of change and changes, militarization also involves tactical, operational, strategic shifts within organizations, in the military and amongst the military brass, the rank and file, and so forth and so on. Over time, they became socialized, and they embody these ideals, that force is preferable to the resolution of conflict through peaceful means. It is also an ideology that frames, as I said, and prioritizes the use of force. There's also the notion of groupthink. When you are in an organization, so as not to be isolated or left out, you tend to subscribe to the norms and the mores of those institutions. And groups are very quick to isolate, punish individuals who do not subscribe to those norms, even when individuals believe that they should not be engaging in such wanton acts of violence. In a nutshell, what I'm suggesting is these institutions and these individuals in particular operated within a structure, an ideological structure, a value structure that propelled them and pushed them to behave the ways that they did. Why would, for instance, a young woman in the middle of Tel Aviv strap herself with bombs and detonate in the downtown of Tel Aviv? She had been systematically indoctrinated. She had come to internalize the values, especially over the military and militarization. They act, for the most part, unquestioningly. because they want to curry favor, because they get rewards, they want to be promoted, or just want to satisfy the higher-ups. I believe this is the context to understand Elijah Martin, Elijah Kanye, and a host of others. In fact, as we said earlier, they may engage in these acts of violence with the presumption that they are doing it for the nation, in protection of the nation, while in actual fact, it is in part the indoctrination that they went through that make them behave that the way they do. Do they feel remorse? Many of them do. But at some point in the execution of these duties, or these this really horrendous crimes, it is possible that some of them may step outside of themselves. They may step outside of themselves. In fact, if you were to compare the personality types before and after, many of them would believe that they are different from those executing those acts of violence. In sum, this is the context, the psychological context, the operational code that we must look at in order to understand these acts of violence. They are training in the military, the hierarchy in the military, which is obey and command. I mean, yes, you have to obey and complain, like was at Armitage. And I'm digging the commissioner there, the chairman. So these are some of the structural as well as the hierarchical issues that make it possible for such acts to happen. Remember that these are also tightly knit organizations. It is a fraternity. They, for the most part, think alike. There are perks and rewards in these acts of violence. And because they are so insulated from civilian control and oversight, they can protect themselves and protect their members from persecution. So in a nutshell, Council, this may be the context.
The language, you talked about it. The language they sometimes use, words like enemy, like war, like others, and so forth.
Yes.
Tends to create a particular mindset
Absolutely.
in them. And that leads to commission of some of these violations, as you are. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes. That the language itself changes, which in many ways is a reflection of the change in mentality. Ordinarily, it is a war against crime. It is a war against drugs. It is a war against criminals. Everything is militarized for the most part. And when the language changes, it is symptomatic of a change in thinking.
For the purposes of this commission, we have had language as follows. Sana Sabali said those captured November 11 were the enemy.
Yes.
Edward Singate also called them enemy. That, well, if you're captured in war, you expect to be tortured.
Exactly.
That's what we are trained to do. If you're captured by the enemy, you're tortured. This is the mindset.
This is the mindset, exactly. In fact, I was thinking about those examples as well. And you see, it gives them psychological comfort. If you're branded enemy, your rights are totally taken away. And whatever actions they take in their elimination is justified by the language and the ideology that underpins it. So ideologies can be very important and very dangerous. By naming somebody a terrorist, by naming somebody a cockroach, you dehumanize them. And once you dehumanize them, then you have the psychological preparation to do unto them whatever that you wish.
You used another interesting example here. You said in paragraph 134, Alaji Kani, Alaji Martin, and others like them were trained and socialized in a hierarchical, regimented, and deeply patriarchal organization,
Yes.
mandated to defend the homeland through the use of deadly force when necessary. It follows that violations of rights by Alaji Martin against officers or citizens turned enemy were a perceived duty performed on behalf of Yahya Jammeh, who was the embodiment of the nation, and officers under whom he served. We have heard Martin say that their mantra was Oga before God. That betrays, that shows exactly what you are saying here.
Absolutely, Counsel. Absolutely.
It's Oga before God. Another interesting thing you raised in paragraph 133 is the culture of silence being imbued in them as part of their modus operandi.
Yes.
Nobody would talk about it.
They wouldn't talk or report these violations of human rights. They keep it under wraps until they are discovered. And I think I want to also introduce another element that reinforces or buttresses this mindset. Military organizations are typically male-dominated, as in other parts of society, but more so than in the military. So that there is an embedded element of patriarchy, that is, the domination of men by women in society is replicated within military institutions. You spill blood, it is the men that spill blood for the most part. It is the men who defend the nation. So that there is, in fact, a dominant and a subordinate social relationship. And it not only reinforces those dominant subordinate relationships within the military, but those are also relationships that permeate the entire society. So, in a sense, Council, Commissioners, all this converge to propel these individuals to engage in the kinds of activities that they did.
How about the notion of wannabe, wanting to belong
Yes.
to that select group
Yes.
of mature men?
Yes.
Those who are strong and capable.
Yes. You are a man, your rite of passage, in other words, is to have killed. Your rite of passage is to have killed or maimed. Then the fear would have been taken away. Thereafter, you will do almost anything without fear or favor.
But also this false sense of importance, like being made to believe that you, these killers, are the chosen few. You are the people who can decide whether a person lives or dies.
Yeah. It's a power.
You think you are that elite group like the junglers who think they were superstars, these are the ones who are selected to.
It's all part of the socialization. It's all probably a part of the groupthink. And these are values that you're the best. You're the most highly trained. You can take on anything. And of course, with the reward system that comes along with it. After an operation, of course, they are rewarded with not only money, but other things.
Such as?
Well, I've been told alcohol, lots of money for sure, long breaks to recuperate from their misery, and certainly and so forth and so on.
That's interesting. But what is their response to consciousness of guilt? That I did this. Do they feel remorseful at all? Or do they have a system of internalizing it and denying it, a system of denial?
I think both. I want to recall in particular the testimony of Alhaji Kani. Even though Alhaji committed all those horrendous crimes, alcohol became his rescue. He said here that he drank a lot. He felt bad. He felt so bad, he felt alienated from his society.
For others, it was prayers.
Prayers too, and he prayed too. And for others, it could include anything really, as a means of escape. So what I'm saying is, the guilt is there, and they assuage the guilt using different means that works for them. And it could lead to depression. Many of them are so angry with themselves that they in fact inflict the pain upon themselves. Some of them become suicidal. Some of them may hurt themselves or undertake highly risky, life-threatening activities in an effort to assuage the guilt and pain. So they are also deeply traumatized as individuals.
Thank you very much, Professor Saine, for that. Now let's move on to your concluding remarks.
Okay.
Starting from paragraph 144. It's quite short and punchy.
Yes.
You may read them out.
You may read it out. Concluding remarks. Political, legal, economic, and social development in the Gambia following the junior officer-led coup in 1994 witnessed a disturbing human rights deficit amid deepening poverty. Soldier-turned-President Yahya Jammeh had ruled the country with an iron fist through repressive decrees, a rubber-stamped National Assembly, and a hand-picked cadre of compromised Nigerian and Gambian judges. Jammeh systematically usurped traditional roles and legally relegated to organs, he usurped roles traditionally relegated to organs and branches of the state, and in their place, he instituted a national security vampire state, whose primary roles were to concentrate power as well as resources around him and the military security elite. The other role of this state was repression, both formally and through clandestine groups, like the junglers. In the end, Jammeh succeeded in muzzling the press, silencing journalists, the Gambia Bar Association, moribund trade unions, and social movements. Growing militarization of Gambian society, that is, a shift in personal, institutional values, and an ideology in which force was perceived as the solution to security and other political challenges, intensified. The resulting blurring of mandates and jurisdictions between the army and the police became fertile ground for atrocious human rights violations, which impacted several generations or baskets of human rights. Cultural, religious values converged with Jammeh's own occult impulses to construct himself as invincible. It inspired a cult-like aura and following. It is in this context that perpetrators of rights violations, like Elijah Kanye, Elijah Martin, specifically, the junglers generally, must be situated and their actions analyzed to make sense of these atrocities. As I said, and as you said earlier, Counsel, this is not to rationalize their atrocities, but to shed light while drawing on a growing scholarly literature to make sense of these individuals and these clandestine groups. While each perpetrator must be viewed and analyzed as unique and must take responsibility for their actions, many in a similar situation could or would have committed similar atrocities. A smaller number yet would not. Thank you, Counsel.
And thus, Jammeh's template to become dictator in Gambia was, correct me if I'm wrong, silence the media.
Yes.
Silence the Bar Association. Ban politicians. Remove them from the political scene. Control the army through fear and elimination. Outlaw demonstrations. Those who demonstrated would go to jail. Controlled businesses, driving some away from business. Reshaped the civil service into a tribal enclave. Put fear in people through the NIA and security agencies. Elimination of political opponents and use of the junglers to send people 6 feet deep, or maybe into a well in some other country. Creation of an aura of supernatural powers through the fake HIV/AIDS treatments and others. And propaganda machinery that painted him as the king.
Absolutely.
You agree? And then rubber stamp National Assembly to give things some semblance of legality. That was Yahya Jammeh.
Yes.
How would you suggest that he be remembered in Gambian history?
Yahya Jammeh was an anomaly in so many ways. He was a brilliant strategist. Jammeh embodied a level of intelligence, in my view, that was similar to that of notorious dictators and killers, including Idi Amin, even to the degree of Hitler, to some degree, at a smaller scale. That's the kind and the part of Yahya Jammeh we need to understand. And he did all of this to gain power, to control it, and to ensure that he wasn't threatened in the process. I think he also has another part of him, with all the sinister tendencies he had. There was a human side to Yahya Jammeh. He was adept, culturally adept person. He could even make or crack a joke. He appreciated the music. He appreciated the culture, which he sometimes used in a way that was disastrous to those who engaged in it. At the end of the day, he did some good things for the country. I think he awakened the Gambian consciousness. It was a rude awakening in that after Yahya Jammeh, I don't believe a leader like him can emerge in this country.
Why do you say that? Is it because we allowed power to be so sweet that he couldn't let go? Or was it because of our just utter silence?
I think the utter silence more than anything. I think we were complicit in what Jammeh did, directly and indirectly. Many stood on the sidelines. They didn't want to be involved. And in doing so, they further emboldened Yahya Jammeh to become the dictator he was. His level of violence escalated over time, ultimately resulting in the executions in 2012. He was going to up the ante in an effort to ensure that he remained in power at whatever cost. But as I was saying earlier, there was a good side to him.
In a sense, you're saying this is the man who would go to any extent just to maintain himself in power.
Yes.
Even if it meant killing his own people.
Yes.
That's the way he should be remembered in Gambian history.
I think we should remember him that way.
Good. Thank you very much. Could you, for the benefit of some of our listeners, give us a brief summary of the report in the languages you most comfortable?
Okay.
And feel free to mix it any which way you want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That's a tall order, but I will try. Assalamu alaikum, mbokk yi, maa ngi leen di nuyu yéen ñëpp. Ku nekk ci turam ak ci santam.
Oops. I understand that there should be changes in the translator's booth, in the interpreter's booth. Yeah. Are we okay now? Okay, please proceed, Professor.
Okay, should I start over? Waaw, maa ngi leen di nuyu yéen ñëpp ku nekk ci turam ak ci santam.
My greetings to every single person, both name and surname.
Oops, okay, sorry. I forgot. We have to have it in English. Yeah.
Okay. Di leen jox yéen ñëpp seen wàccuwaay.
Extending all of my gratitude to all of you.
Di leen gërëm.
Thanks to all of you
ci jotaay bi ñu am ci ñaari fan yi paase nii.
for these 2 days sitting here.
Man nag boo gisee mu tax ma ñëw ci jotaay bi.
The reason for my coming to this sitting
mooy dama bëggoon a waxtaan ak askan wi.
The reason is that I wanted to talk to the nation.
Liñ ma sant.
What I was told to do
moo doon ma jël suma xam-xam ak suma man-man.
was to use my knowledge and my know-how
ma fecci farafàncang li fi xew.
to come and explain what has happened here, what has transpired in this nation.
Bi fi Jawara nekkee.
When Jawara was here,
yal na ko Yàlla yërëm.
may Allah have mercy on him.
ak bi fi Yahya Jammeh ñëwee.
And when Yahya Jammeh came,
ak bi mu fi jógee.
until when he left here.
Looloo doon suma warugal.
That was the reason for my being here.
ci ñaari fan yi yëpp.
In these 2 days,
waxtaan ak askan wi.
I have talked to the nation.
di leen wan.
Showing the nation
fan la ak naka la Yahya Jammeh.
what and how Yahya Jammeh,
jóg.
how he got
jël nguur gi.
to take the government of this country.
not Gambians yi.
and imposed something on the Gambians,
sàcc xaalis,
steal our resources,
rey
kill people,
suñ mbokk yi,
and kill our relatives,
bàyyi fi loo xam ne lii
and left something behind
am na tënk-tënk.
which you know has to be explained fully.
Tënk-tënk boo xam ne bi balaa ci réew mi jógee.
And that is before people have mercy on it.
Dina yàgg torop.
It will take a long time before people
li ma ñaan rek mooy ñun ñëpp ñu nekk benn.
What I am appealing to people is that let's all come together and unite.
buñ fàttali fi xew.
Let's not forget what has happened here.
te takku.
And we should try by all means
ne lii dafa amati.
that this should never occur again in this nation.
mbaari mandinkoolu.
Fellow Gambians,
mbaal be konton na.
greetings to all of you.
andi mbaara.
Thank you very much.
kabrin nata.
Since I came here,
last 2 days.
these last 2 days,
me doko kende kele jang.
I'm doing a job here.
Bel tantula mbal jaila.
I'm extending my thanks and
my
Mandinka is not quite clear, but I extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to all of you. Sometime, if I come back again, we will discuss. I'll talk to you to tell you that what happened in this country is very bad, ugly. We should all get up and fight
to make sure so
that no occurrence of this kind will ever happen in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll hand over the floor to the chair for further questions, and also for you to be given the opportunity to say your closing remarks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Extraordinary 2 days. We are very grateful to you, appreciate your coming to enlighten us on what really transpired in this country and the personality of individuals and institutions that were here for 22 years. Before I turn to the commissioners for any questions they may have, just one small question from me, and that is the role of the military in constitutional and governance structures. What lesson should we in Gambia, or countries like Gambia going through transition, learn or avoid in looking at these structures of governance and the constitution, as I mentioned earlier? If you look at examples, of Pakistan and Myanmar. Myanmar, it is a constitutional requirement that the military be represented in parliament. They have a deciding vote in parliament. They insist on military being part of the structure.
Yes.
Pakistan, I'm not sure of the constitution, but they have a similar important and sometimes they think indispensable role for the military. There, I wonder if you want to just comment on those two, what we should avoid in having the military participate in that. Then I'll come back with a second short question.
Thank you, Chairman Sise. That is clearly a very important question. I think it is a very slippery slope when you include members of the military into structures of governance. At the same time, it could be a boon to stability and order within society and a country. It is another mechanism used by leaders to manage and control the military. In works that I have done in the past, that is a mechanism that is used by many countries, as you have suggested. It to some degree insulates regimes from possible coup d'etats because the military are just as invested as their civilian colleagues in maintaining the status quo. The threat, though, may come, as in Thailand and other places. It is the junior officers that may sometimes effect a coup. But if you're able to disperse the military personnel and deploy them in the civil service and other parts of the diplomatic service, that may be a possibility, that may be a means of diluting the potential power of the military. And this has been practiced in some other places. Give the young lieutenants, give them scholarships to go study history, political science. Take them to their academies and teach them about human rights would be another. So while the military, therefore, can be a threat to democracy, if managed well, reformed, restructured, trained, professionalized, it could be a boon for national development and stability.
Thank you very much. My second point is really more of an anecdote on relating to the mindset and some of the things that we heard here from our military witnesses, and that is that the military has a role or even a responsibility, perhaps even a moral duty to overthrow a government that they didn't like, or they think that they would do a better job in running the country. When Sani Abacha died suddenly in Nigeria, the Nigerian government structures there, they were going through some transition. The Secretary General of the UN at that time, Kofi Annan, went with him to spend 4 days in Abuja talking to all Nigerian stakeholders to tell them that the country should go back quickly to civilian rule. One of the interlocutors that he had was Yakubu Gowon, the leader of Nigeria, a military leader, participated in the first coup, but the leader during the Civil War. Gowon came, there were 3 of us there, SG, Gowon, and myself. For 3 hours, we were going through reviewing the situation in Nigeria. The one thing that was absolutely clear to us was Gowon saying that, Secretary General, we made a big mistake here in Nigeria. The country is suffering from it. We have a lot of blame to, our share of it, it's a whole lot. And that was that in '66, he said we should not have been involved in overthrowing the government and bringing military rule in this country. Military guys said we were not trained to run countries. We were not trained to handle civilian situations like that. And that hasn't changed. The messing up of the country started from there. Yes, some can turn around and say, well, of course, it's not his day. He was overthrown as well. And he went out and studied and came back and established a think tank here in Nigeria. He probably can turn around and start lamenting about what happened in Nigeria. But it was very clear that the role of the military, as far as he was concerned, was not running countries, but providing security just a brief anecdote on that one, that the military are not trained them to do that. Nigeria, he said, was in a mess. I don't know if it's still in a mess. He said everything goes back to this idea that the military in '66 thought that they could do a better job. The eastern region, western region, northern region, things were going bad, and therefore they turn around and say, well, we can do a better job. Let's get rid of these people and then go on. A brief anecdote in there.
Doctor, I couldn't agree more. You see, I think we academics are partly to blame for this consciousness or this idea that the military are better prepared, imbued with nationalism, patriotism, and so forth and so on, and the skills to run a country. In the theorizing about the military in the 1950s and the 1960s, this was a popularly held view by academics. Only 25 years later, did we begin to question this idea. But most of the major political scientists, American, European, African, felt that the military was best suited to delivering development and improvement in these countries. That's why you had in Turkey and Greece, in Argentina, in Chile, and a host of other places, you had the military coming in to basically rescue the dwindling economies of these nations. It was an utter failure. Only maybe 40 years later did we begin to revise our theoretical postulations that, in fact, empirically, the military was not suited to such governance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Just to end that point, when we left Abuja, the next stop on our way to London was Accra. Rawlings was around. Rawlings didn't like the idea of the Secretary General of the UN going to Nigeria and telling Abubakar, Abu Salam, who was the acting head of state at that time, for the soldiers to go back to the barracks.
Yes.
He spent almost an hour lecturing us about the dangers of military going back to the barracks. And as he put it, he said, the boys below, you don't know what they're doing. Meaning they can revolt and then overthrow Abu Salam. Yeah. Anyway, commissioners, if you have any questions, we go ahead and do that. Commissioner Kinte, you have the floor.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, Mr. Saine. We are very grateful. We had a wealth of experience and knowledge shared in these 2 days. We are very thankful. It isn't a surprise anyway. What I have experienced over time, because most of the time I've been in the Gambia for all these 60 years or so of my life.
Yes.
So if I say what I have experienced is valid. But also your lectures and your report has been reinforcement to what I have understood or what. I have 4 or 5 words or phrases that I attribute to the failures and the atrocities or all the problems we had in this country. One of them is our culture of subservience. The other one is psychophancy. Another one is dogmatic indoctrination. Probably a last one is greed and corruption. If you would help to dilate in these things, in these 4 undesirable characteristics, it's likely going to sum a great deal of your lectures into a nutshell. Please, thank you.
Commissioner Kinte. I appreciate your kind words. I believe these are all embedded in our traditional cultures. Dogmatism, greed, corruption. In fact, in all of that is saying, harmi finko taka, fofla leke. We have an inbuilt cultural acceptance for corruption, which in turn breeds greed. And the way we bring about children, and we are all brought up well, I must say, subservience is preferred to questioning. And I do believe, Commissioner Kinte, that the reason why Yahya Jammeh stayed as long as he did was this culture of subservience and not challenging authority. I believe the education system, among other things, starting from our homes, must begin to teach our children respectfully to be assertive and to question authority. Otherwise, that subservience that you talk about would continue to hurt us in the long term. In sum, I believe we have a lot of work to do in our homes, in our schools, and throughout society. I am taken aback by our lack of respect for individuality, and to let our children grow to be what they really can be in terms of their personality. We are so eager and ready to conform and bring everybody else who tries to veer into the fold. For the last 45 years or more, I have been spelling my name Abdoulaye. But when I come to Gambia, everybody spells it Abdolie. And I would insist. I was applying for something with government, and I told the clerk, this is the way I spell my name. And he insisted, dismissed me for spelling my name differently. So what I'm saying, essentially, Commissioner, these are deeply embedded in our society, and we need to, I think the respect for age is great also, but we must begin to challenge one another. Maslabi dafabari. Maslabi is just too much. We have to speak truth to one another and speak truth to power, more importantly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Carr.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of questions. Professor, thank you firstly for the brilliant lecture. We enjoyed it and we learned a lot. My first question has to do with the tendency of our leaders to overstay in power, starting from Jawara, who stayed, I believe, for 30 years in power. Then we had Jammeh for 22 years. In your research, did you find out any reasons as to why that is the case?
Thank you, Commissioner Carr. You know, power is sweet. And whoever tells you that they want to stay for just a short time, well, including our current president, is fooling us. You become accustomed to a particular lifestyle. Life relatively is easier than it used to be. You are, to some degree, addicted to the push, the finance, and the pump of the situations. And really, most people can just have enough of that. It takes a really principled person to honor and not overstay their service to the country. Sadara, without everybody, well, most people know my relationship and my love for Saadata. And I do believe he too overstayed. And in his case, I could come up with justifications, but I believe he also was taken by the pump, the circumstances, and the panache to some degree, although very modest man he was. Yeah, Jammeh stayed because, as I was saying earlier, I just wanted to be in the limelight. Yahya would not have anybody else's sunshine where he was present. It was all about him. This is the narcissistic tendency in Yahya Jammeh. It was about him and him alone, and everything was about him. And after all the atrocities that he committed, part of the reason why he wanted to stay much longer was to really protect himself and to stay in the country longer. Well, now we know where he is. That's something he tried to avoid for as much as he could. Thank you, Commissioner Kerr.
The second is, you have been an academic activist for long, and we know in societies all over the world, academics play a great role. I should say academic activists play a great role in enhancing a culture of democracy, accountability, and good governance. How do you think we can enhance that in this country?
That's a difficult question, but I'll try. I think the question that Commissioner Kinte raised could be a good start. Questioning, challenging authority, and not accepting something just because it is said by an authority. And I think one way of doing that is to begin at home and the schools, to provide students and children thinking skills, critical thinking and learning skills, to weigh information, to make critical assessment of information, and not rote learning, and in the process come to some conclusion of their own. Well, I have been blessed. I was brought up in the same context as most of you, although at an earlier time. But I guess my education also helped. Being in the US and being exposed to so much, and being an activist, even as an undergraduate student, having a professor who mentored me, and questions of social justice, I think imbued me with my activism. So I didn't say much about it in these hearings, but among others, including Sol Menga, Kotro, Saine, and a host, Habib, and a lot of people in Atlanta, in Washington, D.C., and my sister and auntie, Adelaide Sose, we marched the streets. In fact, in Washington, D.C., the last demonstrations we had against Yahya Jammeh, he couldn't come out of his hotel. He had to be smuggled out. And I say all that to say that my activism, political activism, informs my scholarship, and my scholarship in turn informs my activism. They fuel me both. At one point I was just saying, well, let me just write and write and write. But when they killed the kids on April 10th and 11th was when I said it wasn't enough just to write. And then I became a dissident. And like many others, what I suffered compares to nothing that the things you've heard in this commission, nothing. It doesn't compare. But many of my colleagues couldn't come home for 22 years. Many of them lost family and friends and couldn't come pay their last respects. But I can go on and on. Thank you Commissioner Kerr.
Final question.
Final question, okay.
Yes. This is linked to Jammeh's hate for demonstrations, for anything that challenged him in public. But recently we saw he was in some way trying to use demonstration to rally his political base. Would you say that is also one of his contradictions?
Yes, it certainly is. Inspiring his APRC militants, he is, to say the least, very crafty. He is very strategic in his thinking. And he will use something good for bad purposes. That is quintessential Yahya Jammeh. I must say I've never met him. I shook his hand once at a reception with my old friend, Mamadou Musa Seka, late, from high school all the way, and I miss him terribly. He introduced me to him. But everything I've said about him really is not firsthand. I don't know him.
Thank you, Bishop. And then I'll turn to the commissioners on the line.
Thank you, Chairman. Professor, thank you so much for the wonderful expose. Now, the thing is, we have heard here in one of our hearings that Yahya was not one of the original coup plotters. Rather, he was invited. Now, what is difficult to understand is how come that Yahya, became a dominant factor. He dominated everybody else, the military, the police, religious leaders, everybody else, he dominated them. How come that he was able to do that as an individual person?
Yes. Commissioner Adiko, that's a difficult question too. But I would propose that Jammeh knew how to manipulate. He knew how to manipulate the members of the council to the degree that they would bestow or restore some respect as well as confidence in him. He, at the beginning, was really very affable, likable person, and could be very convincing and likable. But I guess as he gained more power and prestige and money, those things went into his head, and then he became increasingly more repressive. And in doing so, eliminated practically all those who were in the council in an effort to consolidate himself. So a combination of charm, repression, and brute force combined may explain to some degree how he rose to the top and kept himself there for 22 years. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Imam, you have the floor, please.
Professor Saine, I would like first of all to thank you for the brilliant lecture, but more importantly, for the way you have exposed all that happened in this country for the last 22 years.
Thank you, sir.
Our task, part of our task here, is to reconcile this nation in the light of all the atrocities that have been committed. But the perpetrators of these evil acts are still amongst us, and they're jumping the streets of Banjul and the Kombos, shouting that Yahya will come back, Yahya has to come back, he has to come back. What advice would you give the government and us, the Commission, to handle this situation, to ensure that we are able to create the atmosphere and the opportunity for reconciliation? Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. How can we go about rebuilding this country through reconciliation making sure that each citizen and group and political party enjoy fundamental human rights. It is a very slippery slope, to say the least. One thing I would suggest, Imam, is to have dialogue, open dialogue between contending political parties, even rivals. Create a forum, a political space where all these contending forces can be brought to a table to discuss and hopefully come to some resolution about the way forward. Interfaith dialogue is another conflict that needs to be resolved in our country. And for this, I'm also suggesting that we have the faith houses and personnel, clergy, imam, to bring about some sort of discussion surrounding the tense religious environment that we currently live in. The more we open the political space, my thinking is, the more tolerance we engender in our discussions, being able to listen to one another without being defensive. I think that would augur well for reconciliation, forgiveness, and possibly restitution in this country of ours. Because really, we are fundamentally a good people, a religious people. We are family, we are one nation. You hurt somebody in one family, you are really hurting yourself. You criticize another ethnic group, you are criticizing yourself. You threaten somebody, you threaten us all. So I think there are mechanisms of openness, of dialogue, and that lack of dogmatism, that my way is the only way, that I think really shuts off any possibilities for discussion, reconciliation in the future. Tolerance. And I think what is good about tolerance and a so-called liberal arts education, which I think we must imbue at the UTG, is the ability to listen to somebody, even if you disagree with what they say, and possibly learn something from them. And I think if we can instill those thinking skills in our schools, in our families, and not shut off our kids when they have something to say, I think we can begin to engender this life of tolerance. I guess I'm saying this because I come from a tradition, scholarly tradition, where we can disagree to disagree, and so forth and so on. Thanks. Thank you, Imam. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Deputy Chair, you have the floor, and then Imam C. Deputy Chair. No, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for a very illuminative 2 days. In a way, your response to Imam C's question has partly answered what I want to say. And this is in reference to the point you made about the historical discrimination against the Jolas. Other minority ethnic groups have also claimed such discrimination,
yes,
and used this as a justification for their unflinching support for Jammeh. My question is, was this discrimination intentional? A deliberate attempt by state institutions and by society as a whole to exclude, to marginalize, or to domesticate certain groups of people? Or was it unintentional, cognizant of the fact that discrimination in any shape or form, whether intentional or intentional, is still discrimination and a violation of someone's human rights? But Commissioner Kinte, also touched on that. Our beliefs, our biases, and prejudices and practices can perpetuate such discrimination, supported in part by the tacit cooperation of the persons being discriminated against, as we had in the case of the jewelers who, for some reason, preferred to maintain their own distinct culture and lifestyle, and also in the case of the caste system, which is now being questioned. How do we as a nation change these mindsets so that these discriminatory practices that you have highlighted so succinctly in your paper, based on ethnic, religious, caste, socioeconomic status, and gender, can be dissipated to break the deep divides that are threatening the peace, stability, and unity of our country?
That is a very difficult question, Commissioner Source. And if I really knew the answer, I think I could probably write it and sell it in a book. But it is a difficult question. But let me propose this. I am not very sure about your categorization of intentional and unintentional discrimination. I respect your view. You see, societies are organized along lines of privilege built on a reward system. And the powers that be will determine who gets rewarded, how much, and those that are excluded, based sometimes on very flimsy reasons. Blacks in America, the ideology says, are lazy, they don't want to work. Women are similarly lazy, they talk a lot, this is the ideology. And these become the myth around which discrimination or forms of discrimination are built. What that does is it enables those in power to control the resources and their distribution and channel those resources to those that they prefer or privilege. So yes, I agree with you that some forms of discrimination may be conscious or unconscious. And that is the ideology that underpins it. But at the end of the day, I do believe that discrimination, whatever form it takes, is intentional. And it is couched, justified, rationalized by the use of myth, all of you Nilañ or Jola Nilañ blacks are like this, Mexicans are like this, and you use those phenotype or phenotypical differences as a means of discriminating against them. There is nothing wrong with who they are, but those characteristics become problematized and the basis of discrimination. How can we go about resolving some of this? Equal opportunity for each young girl, boy. They physically, let me say that in another way, the differently abled should also be given this opportunity because they are also highly discriminated peoples or groups. There should be an unyielding principle to treat each and everyone equally, regardless of religion. This is a principle. It's not going to happen in the next 10 or 15 years. I believe we're going to work toward it. And over time, accomplish some of it. It is never going to be a perfect, but I think it can get better. I think it can get better. I think women today, and I have no data to support that, may be doing better today, possibly, than maybe they did 50, 60 years ago. It's a gradual process. I don't know. It's a difficult question, but that's the best I can do for now. Yeah.
Actually, I'm quite satisfied with the answer because
Thank you.
It's a basis for us to step up whatever we're doing.
I appreciate it.
But to also now take on your last point about women, the best laws for women really were passed on the Jammeh. Just to buttress what you were saying.
Yes.
He did some very good things and he did some very bad things. The National Women's Act, which we are very proud of, was passed under him.
Absolutely.
The ban on FGM was also passed. Early marriage, the ban against early marriage was also passed.
Yes.
Domestic violence also. So very good laws have come out, but unfortunately, we lack the implementation. There are huge gaps between the acts and the policies and the practices. But at the same time, having passed those brilliant laws for women, women really suffered under the Jammeh regime. They were brutalized. As you have said in your paper, they were raped, they were tortured, they were imprisoned. So on one hand, he was doing good for the women. On the other hand, he was doing a lot of harm for the women.
Absolutely.
But the women now have the tools that can enable them
Yes.
to play their rightful roles in society. And it is now up to us to insist on the implementation.
Absolutely.
Thank you once again
Thank you.
for a brilliant 2 days.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Sose.
Thank you. Imam C, have the floor.
Professor Saine, maa ngi lay nuyu di la gërëm.
Fay naa la si jërëjëf.
Jërëjëf ci wax bi nga wax nii. Dafa am li may laaj.
Professor Saine, my sincere thanks to you, and I want to ask you a question.
Yaya Jammeh ni mu buggee woon nguur ak doole.
Yaya Jammeh, how he loved power and ruling the people.
Ak ni mu buggee woon tur.
And how he wants to his name.
Su fekkente ne léegi waajuram.
Had it been that now his parents,
wala jabaram,
or wife,
wala doomam,
or his children,
ànduñ ci moom ci loolu li mooy def.
were not in line with what he was doing,
li mooy def ñoom seen xalaat bokku ci.
or what he was doing was not part of their thinking.
Noo gisee naka lay mujjee ak ñoom.
How did you see how did you see his end with them? How was he going to end up with them?
Imam jërëjëf ci laajte bi nga laajte.
Thanks for the question, Imam.
Xam nga ñëpp xam nañ ne Yaya Jammeh dafa dëgër boppa.
All people knew that Yaya Jammeh was a strong-headed person.
Yaya Jammeh du déglu kenn.
He doesn't listen to anybody.
Yaayam sax dégg na daf ko daan saaga.
He said he used to even insult his own mother.
Saagatuma jabaram.
Especially his wife.
Yaya Jammeh ci waxtaan bi ma def tey ak démba.
The discussion I did here today, yesterday and today,
li ma wane mooy.
what I showed here was
Yaya Jammeh moom affaire am.
Yaya Jammeh, his affairs.
Dañ ko mën a wax tey ba ëllëg.
We can talk about it from today to tomorrow.
Waaye ci gàttal rek.
But to cut it short,
Yaya du déglu.
Yaya doesn't listen.
Yaya bu déglu woon.
If he had listened,
li xew fii ñaar fukki at ak ñaar.
what happened or what transpired here in these 22 years of his rule
du fi xew.
would not have happened.
Bu amoon ñoo xam ne dañ ko waxal ni yaay mu déglu yaayam.
If people were there who were giving him good advice, like even his mother
ak sa jabar.
and his wife,
nga xam ne lépp ngeen séexoo.
and whatever is between you and them,
dina doon war a déglu.
he would have listened.
Yaaya dëkk yi nekk bitim réew.
The countries, the other countries,
wax nañ ŋàññe nañ ko.
criticized him.
United Nations ŋàññe nañ ko.
United Nations criticized him.
EU ŋàññe nañ ko.
European Union criticized him.
waaye ba tey.
But up to date,
Yaya dégluwul kenn.
Yaya wouldn't listen to anybody.
ñi ko gën a jege sax.
Even people closer to him.
si nga xam ne mënuñ koo defar mënuñ koo wecc xalaatam ak definam ak doxinam.
People who had the powers to change his thoughts and his deeds.
waa kër lu rek àndaa moom.
Well, just decided to go along with him.
But
it was not their will to go along with him like that. Imam, that's how I saw things. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Saine. If you have any closing remarks to make, please go ahead and do so now.
Well, I want to take this occasion to say how very grateful, humbled, and touched I am by this invitation. I have lectured, presented papers at conferences throughout the world, but this occasion here is the biggest and most gratifying platform I have been on. And that is because much of my academic work and activism has been focused on Gambia. I have given other lectures in Gambia, public lectures, but this compares to none of them. I was gratified and still gratified by the fact that I can share my work with a country that gave me so much. Coming from rural Gambia in those difficult days of the 1960s, I had a scholarship from Kuntur Area Council. My parents couldn't afford the school fees. And I went to Armitage, and then to Udom College. And as they say, the rest is history. So I owe this country. And I'm glad I was able to come and be part of these deliberations. And I want to thank the whole nation for being with us for the last 2 days. And I'm sure I might have said some things very bluntly that might have offended some. But that is the nature of my scholarship and being an activist. But I thank you nonetheless. I also want to thank, because in the process of writing this commission report, I have incurred numerous debts and gratitudes to many individuals and institutions. Of course, my department and university for giving me a 9th-month sabbatical. But I also want to thank the TRRC lead counsel, Esa Fall. I owe him a big debt of gratitude for his probing prompts and questions, his kind comments and suggestions, which undoubtedly improve the quality of this report. I have also incurred debts of gratitude to the former Assistant Legal Counsel, Haraja Balagay, either persons of the UNDP and their staff, for their encouragement and support. To my former colleague, Dr. Baba Gala Jallo, the TRRC Executive Secretary, I also owe a big thank you for your support, unflinching support, on this project and certainly many other projects. Baba contributed a chapter on Guinea on one of the edited volumes I did several years ago. The guy who was going to do the piece on Guinea all of a sudden dropped the project, and I was scurrying for somebody who could do it. And I called Baba, and he wrote a brilliant piece. So Baba, thank you for those many years of collaboration. I also wish to give thanks to a colleague, and certainly all my colleagues whose work have impacted me in Bible scholarship. I also want to thank Dr. Ibrahim Sise, a friend, a colleague, a younger brother, who really did a very good job. You think I did a good job on this? Ibrahim helped quite a bit in doing so too, and I must give him credit. He is one of those young, energetic, scholars, for which I am very grateful. And I would be remiss if I do not include Dr. Lamin B. Sise of the TRRC, the chairman, for mentoring me and countless other students at Armitage in the 1960s. Lamin's passion for scholarly discipline, hard work, and fairness helped shape the formative years of numerous students at Armitage and many, many others in his career. His friends, the now Alhaji Mahmoud Jany was my alcalo at Grey Kunda, and I owe a debt of gratitude to Mahmoud Jany. Ndarao Suso, Ibrahim Suso, I was a little tot when I went to Armitage, and he took me under his wing. And now he's late, but I will be ever grateful to you, Karanta Bojang, for teaching us, even though we didn't like it at the time, for punishing us. I would never thank anybody for punishing me. But you punished us. You showed us the way. You showed us discipline, punctuality. If you came to the dining hall late, Karanta Bojang was sure to send you away, and you would miss your meal for the time. I think Habib Choi, my old friend, classmate at Armitage and Yundum College, would testify to that. So would my Koto Saine. So we thank you and many others. But I've also been mentored and taught by the best at Armitage, at Yundum College. And I want to pay homage, particular homage to my friend and teacher, Omar C., who is now late, who made it possible for me to go to the United States to study. And I am eternally grateful to him. I also had a teacher, and still have a teacher, George Thomas they call him. And Georgie mentored me, inspired my love for literature. And in fact, when I was writing this book, he happened to be visiting in the United States. Georgie picked him up from Atlanta, came to the house in Ohio, and he went through the entire manuscript, editing it. So to many people like these, and my teachers at Armitage, so many of them, the Usman Daus, the Nyanko Njais, the Saim Kintes, I mean, I'll be mistaken if I call them all, the E.T. Jangs, the J.J. Ndaus, all of them, I am so grateful. There is one person, though, I must single out also, Miss Jane Garlic. I don't know how many of you, well, maybe you guys, Mrs. Sauce, Mr. Jallo, and Lamin would know, and of course, Habib. My passion for writing was honed in Miss Garlic's classes. That's when I began to write. You're talking about 40-something years ago. And at the time, I was going to be a novelist. But gave it up for political science when I went to the States. So literature remains my first love. So I want to really thank my former teachers at Coward School, Armitage High, Yundum College. They were the best of role models. They were the best anybody could have hoped for. They sowed the seeds in me to excel. To my family and friends who have been very supportive in Gambia and those in the United States and really throughout the world, so that their collective influence is something that has sustained me over the years. Commissioners, I thank you. I thank you for your hard work. I thank you for your forbearance. I thank you for having to go through those testimonies, because watching those testimonies on TV in the comfort of my home rendered me sleepless many, many nights. Lead counsel, to your staff and the entire staff of TRRC, I am eternally grateful for this opportunity and look forward to maybe coming back at some other point. Thank you so much. Thank you, the audience.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Saine. The pleasure is really ours that you agree to come and enlighten us, as I said earlier, on what happened in this country. Thank you very much. Very brilliant report you've given, and a brilliant testimony here during this past 2 days. We really appreciate it very much. And thank you for your kind words. Your Armitage days. Armitage was, and it still is, the best high school in the world.
I think so.
St. Augustine's guys can say whatever they want to say. And Gambia High School as well. But Armitage still is #1 high school in the Gambia.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you again very much indeed for coming to share your views with the Commission. We will take a break, or we'll close for the day and resume our proceedings tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. Council, you don't have any witness siding in the back that you can bring?
No, only that I am surprised.
About what?
Mr. Saine, looking 40, telling us that these things happened over 40 years ago. But that said,
I am 68 years old. I'm not ashamed to say. 68 years old.
Absolutely, but he hasn't changed one bit from those Armitage days.
I can imagine.
Very brilliant young kid running around.
Lyman is very kind.
But again, thank
thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed for coming, and we will meet tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.